I like when my books are worn, used, when they look like they've been read. Chapter 13, Pride and Prejudice. I hope, my dear, said Mr. Bennet to his wife as they were at breakfast the next morning, that you have ordered a good dinner today, because I have reason to expect an addition to our family party. Who do you mean, my dear? I know of nobody that is coming, I am sure, unless Charlotte Lucas should happen to call in, and I hope my dinners are good enough for her. I do not believe she often sees such at home. The person of whom I speak is a gentleman and a stranger. Mrs. Bennet even sparkled, or Mrs. Bennet's eyes sparkled. A gentleman and a stranger? It is Mr. Bingley, I am sure. Why, Jane, you never dropped a word of this, you sly thing. Well, I am sure I shall be extremely glad to see Mr. Bingley. But, good Lord, how unlucky, there was not a bit of fish to be got today. Lydia, my love, ring the bell. I must speak to Hill this moment. It is not Mr. Bingley, said her husband. It is a person whom I never saw in the whole course of my life. This roused a general astonishment, and he had the pleasure of being eagerly questioned by his wife and 5 daughters at once. After amusing himself some time with their curiosity, he thus explained, About a month ago I received this letter, and about a fortnight ago I answered it, for I thought it a case of some delicacy and requiring early attention. It is from my cousin, Mr. Collins, who, when I am dead, may turn you all out of his house as soon as he pleases. So I guess it's the house they live in is his cousin's house. Oh, my dear, cried his wife, I cannot bear to hear that mentioned. Pray do not talk of that odious man. I do think it is the hardest thing in the world that your estate should be entailed away from your own children, and I am sure if I had been you, I should have tried long ago to do something or other about it. Jane and Elizabeth attempted to explain to her the nature of an entail. They had often attempted it before, but it was a subject on which Mrs. Bennet was beyond the reach of reason, and she continued to rail bitterly against the cruelty of settling an estate away from a family of 5 daughters in favor of a man whom nobody cared anything about. It certainly is a most iniquitous affair, said Mr. Bennet, and nothing can clear Mr. Collins from the guilt of inheriting Longbourn. But if you will listen to his letter, you may perhaps be a little softened by his manner of expressing himself. So I want to look up iniquitous. No, that I am sure I shall not, and I think it was very impertinent of him to write to you at all, and very hypocritical. I hate such false friends. Why could not he keep on quarreling with you as his father did before him? Why could not he keep on quarreling with you as his father did before him? Why, indeed, he does seem to have had some filial scruples on that head, as you will hear. Like filial? Maybe I'm saying it wrong. I don't fucking know. So here's the letter. From Hunsford, near Westernham, Kent, 15th of October. Dear Sir, the disagreement subsisting between yourself and my late honored father always gave me much uneasiness, and since I had the misfortune to lose him, I have frequently wished to heal the breach, but for some time I was kept back by my own doubts, fearing lest it might seem disrespectful to his memory for me to be on good terms with anyone with whom it had always pleased him to be at variance. There, Mrs. Bennet. My mind, however, is now made up on the subject. For having received ordination at Easter, I have been so fortunate as to be distinguished by the patronage of the Right Honourable Lady Catherine de Bourgh, widow of Sir Louis de Bourgh, whose bounty and beneficence has preferred me to the valuable rectory of this parish, where it shall be my earnest endeavour to demean myself with grateful respect towards her ladyship, and be ever ready to perform those rites and ceremonies which are instituted by the Church of England. As a clergyman, moreover, I feel it my duty to promote and establish the blessing of peace in all families within the reach of my influence. And on these grounds I flatter myself that my present overtures of good will are highly commendable, and that the circumstance of my being next in the entail of Longbourn estate will be kindly overlooked on your side, and not lead you to reject the offered olive branch. I cannot be otherwise than concerned at being the means of injuring your amiable daughters, and beg leave to apologize for it, as well as to assure you of my readiness to make them every possible amends. But of this hereafter. If you should have no objection to receive me into your house, I propose myself the satisfaction of waiting on you and your family, Monday, November 18th by 4 o'clock, and shall probably trespass on your hospitality till Saturday se'nnight following, which I can do without any inconvenience, as Lady Catherine is far from objecting to my occasional absence on a Sunday, provided that some other clergyman is engaged to do the duty of the day. I remain, dear sir, with respectful compliments to your lady and daughters, your well-wisher and friend, William Collins. So he's pretty much saying, I'm a religious man now. I'm a man of faith, so I just want to make peace with everybody. And yeah, didn't really make it clear that he's going to let them have the house, but he doesn't want to come to some sort of understanding. So at 4 o'clock, therefore, we may expect this peacemaking gentleman, said Mr. Bennet as he folded up the letter. He seems to be a most conscientious and polite young man, upon my word, and I doubt not will prove a valuable acquaintance, especially if Lady Catherine should be so indulgent as to let him come to us again. There is some sense in what he says about the girls, however, and if he is disposed to make them any amends, I shall not be the person to discourage him. Though it is difficult, said Jane, to guess in what way he can mean to make us the atonement he thinks our due, the wish is certainly to his credit. Elizabeth was chiefly struck with his extraordinary deference for Lady Catherine and his kind intention of christening, marrying, and burying his parishioners wherever it were required. He must be an oddity, I think, said she. I cannot make him out. There was something very pompous in his style. And what can he mean by apologizing for being next in the entail? We cannot suppose he would help it if he could. Can he be a sensible man, sir? No, my dear, I think not. I have great hopes of finding him quite the reverse. There was a mixture of servility and self-importance in his letter, which promises well. I am impatient to see him. In point of composition, said Mary, his letter does not seem defective. The idea of the olive branch perhaps is not wholly new, yet I think it is well expressed. To Catherine and Lydia, neither the letter nor its writer were in any degree interesting. It was next to impossible that their cousin should come in a scarlet coat, and it was now some weeks since they had received pleasure from the society of a man in any other color. As for their mother, Mr. Collins's letter had done away much of her ill will, and she was preparing to see him with a degree of composure which astonished her husband and daughters. Mr. Collins was punctual to his time, and was received with great politeness by the whole family. Mr. Bennet indeed said little, but the ladies were ready enough to talk, and Mr. Collins seemed neither in need of encouragement nor inclined to be silent himself. He was a tall, heavy-looking young man of 25. His air was grave and stately, and his manners were very formal. He had not been long seated before he complimented Mrs. Bennet on having so fine a family of daughters, said he had heard much of their beauty, but that in this instance fame had fallen short of the truth, and added that he did not doubt her seeing them all in due time well disposed of in marriage. This gallantry was not much to the taste of some of his hearers, but Mrs. Bennet, who quarrelled with no compliments, answered most readily, "You are very kind, sir, I am sure, and I wish with all my heart it may prove so, for else they will be destitute enough. Things are settled so oddly. You allude perhaps to the entail of this estate." Ooh, the mom's trying to be clever. "Ah, sir, I do indeed. It is a grievous affair to my poor girls. You must confess, not that I mean to find fault with you, for such things I know are all chance in this world." I want to stop before I flip the page. So she's saying, like, I hope my daughters find husbands, so that way there's a guarantee they'll have somewhere to live, There is no knowing how estates will go when once they come to be entailed. She finishes, that's her finishing her thought. And I think that this is the cousin. "I am very sensible, madame, of the hardship to my fair cousins, and could say much on the subject, but that I am cautious of appearing forward and precipitate. But I can assure the young ladies that I come prepared to admire them. At present I will not say more, but perhaps when we are better acquainted." He was interrupted by a summons to dinner, and the girls smiled on each other. They were not the only objects of Mr. Collins's admiration. The hall, the dining room, and all its furniture were examined and praised, and his commendation of everything would have touched Mrs. Bennet's heart but for the mortifying supposition of his viewing it all as his own future property. And his commendation of everything would have touched Mrs. Bennet's heart but for the mortifying supposition of his viewing it all as his own future property. So either she got that vibration or vibe from what he was saying, or just the fact that he's commenting on what's pretty much his by law. She couldn't really, she was kind of being anxious, The dinner, too, in its turn, was highly admired, and he begged to know to which of his fair cousins the excellence of its cookery was owing, but here he was set right by Mrs. Bennet, who assured him with some asperity that they were very well able to keep a good cook, and that her daughters had nothing to do in the kitchen. He begged pardon for having displeased her. In a softened tone she declared herself not at all offended, but he continued to apologize for about a quarter of an hour. Jesus. Again, he's 25. He thinks he's gonna go into the religious world. He's just barely. He's not that wise, honestly. Especially living in a formal world like that. I don't know. It's funny. It's pretty funny. I don't know, but it's obviously gonna play a part, right? That idea of not knowing where you're gonna live. A lot of women, you'd be surprised. A lot of women are most independent, especially this day and age in modern day. Women are going to be more independent than men in a sense because men are more brutish. Men are more, I would say, have a more built-in violence to them, inclination, a more aggressive nature. They always have to submerge. Like, men have to try harder to be civil than women. And you see a lot more women in the workforce these days. And you might have like a man would rather, the boss is probably going to be a man, right? And he's going to hire more women. Not just because he's a sick fuck, but because it's more pleasant to be around women. Women are more agreeable. Women are more servile, you know? And so that's what you see, especially now in this, you know, in this society, American society, where it's a lot more violence in our heads. We watch a lot more bullshit. We're a lot more weaker. We're a lot more isolated. We're a lot more sensitive, you know? So that I see that like this book is, I can see where this story's going, you know, the woman's concern of finding a husband to find somewhere to live. But it goes back to my original thought is that I think statistics will still show a lot of women, and it's probably more, especially if she's not married. I mean, women is like, it's weird when you look at marriage, it's kind of more of a feminine thing. It's kind of weird. Maybe, I'm only saying this as a man, right? You look at it like, oh, a man being single, having multiple women would be more normal than a woman who's single with no family or kids and a husband. You're like, why don't you have a husband though? Like, what's wrong? Or at least a boyfriend. Again, the mind varies. The thoughts are variables, and people are capricious. Their ideas and thoughts change easily. So, not necessarily, but they do change. Some characteristics in a human are difficult to, personality traits are difficult to change. I'm not saying that, but people are hypocrites. People will hold a strong belief in this room, and depending upon who's in the other room will maybe not hold that same belief so strongly. But the idea, you don't really think about it just till I read this book, especially back then. A woman's concern, you know, like women didn't have something down, they didn't go just get a job over here, you know. They were living in these little ass villages in the country, and their towns were super small as well, right? And the country was even smaller. It was only their family. But in the town is like our country today. So in some areas, a woman's concern, especially at 5 daughters, you have fucking 4 daughters, like, damn, I gotta find 4 husbands. That's why like Mr. Bingley can take the cake, you know. He can't take it all, but he could definitely has the choosing of the first slice of the cake, you know. And a man like Mr. Bingley, you know, and you don't think about how many women are still living with their folks, even in suburban and urban life, especially now, you know. There's a lot more women than men. And even how weak men have gotten. That's why you see a lot of this stuff. That's why it's just natural. You see all this women using their sex for money now. High class prostitutes, you know, strippers and OnlyFans, or making money just in, like, dude, there is like soft porn. There's like soft porn prostitutes now, and those are the women on Instagram who post in workout bikinis, or not workout bikini, workout clothes, or workout bikinis, or just even in regular clothes, sexy clothing, sexy office wear, you know, sexy casual wear, short shorts, you know, like that's they're monetizing off of that, so they're selling their beauty, they're selling their sexuality, and so that's because there's more women than men. They need to survive. They're gonna use their beauty, dude, and it becomes kind of clonish. It becomes repetitive. It becomes like, wow, you look like that person. What, dude? Like, Nothing changes. Like some bodies look the same. Faces look different. Bodies look the same. So I can see where this is going. I can see why women would love this book. You know, I don't. You get this book is going to give you the classical perspective of a woman, and it's very interesting. Very.